You're listening to Queer Tasmania.
Queer Tasmania.
Queer Tasmania.
Queer Tasmania.
With Gary Wakefield.
In October 1998, Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old gay student at the University of Wyoming, was beaten, tortured, and left to die near the town of Laramie. When he was discovered the following morning, he was taken to a hospital in Colorado, where he died 6 days later from severe head injuries received during the attack. This murder made international headlines and brought worldwide attention to hate crime legislation, which ultimately led to major changes in the protections of LGBT plus folk across the United States, and some could argue the world. Members of the Tectonic Theatre Project travelled to Laramie and spoke to the local community in the wake of this horrific murder. These interviews became the literal words of a play called The Laramie Project, which first opened in New York City in 2000 and has been performed all over the world. And it's coming to Tasmania, to Launceston specifically, being produced by Three River Theatre.
My name's Rae Smith. My pronouns are she, her, and I am proudly the director of the Laramie Project, which is being produced by Three River Theatre here later this month.
Yeah, my name's Jaz Daniells and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm one of the actors that Rae will be directing.
My name's Travis Hennessy and my pronouns are he, him, and I am the vocal coach for the show.
Amazing. Thank you all for making time and coming in today. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Gary.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Who would like to tell me about Three River Theatre?
I would, yes. I would proudly like to speak on behalf of Three River Theatre. So Three River Theatre have been around for a very long time and have done some excellent work, of which I've seen quite a bit, particularly over this last 8 years. I sort of was living in Western Australia for a period of time and then returned back to Launceston, my hometown, and was just so impressed sort of over that period how much community theatre had sort of changed. And I loved that Three River Theatre weren't shying away from, you know, material that's quite gritty and confronting and at times uncomfortable to watch. So I knew when I was, you know, had shifted, I've done a lot of musical theatre and dramatic acting on stage, so I've sort of been more on the performance front predominantly since I was about 15, and just had a real pull towards directing this particular show. Not directing specifically, but I wanted to, you know, potentially look at having my directorial debut with the Laramie Project. So I pitched to Three River Theatre, quite a passionate one. I don't actually think they would have been, you know, even considered saying no because they know how upset I would have been. I went in all guns blazing, as they say, and they very, kindly agreed pretty quickly for me to be part of the 2024 season for Three River. So it's very exciting.
It wasn't a tough sell.
It wasn't a tough sell. And it was even lovely hearing Georgie Todman, the president, and a few of the committee members saying, Georgie said it quite publicly, that it was a bit of a no-brainer. I think because they also hadn't potentially secured exactly what they were thinking for the 2024 year. But yes, Laramie Project is up, and then Endgame is the second show they're doing later this year by Samuel Beckett. So two really interesting, powerful pieces.
Wonderful. And why is the Laramie Project so important to you?
I've always been an ally of the queer community since I was a teenager. And mostly due to my mum, who has always worked in the health department. And I remember when I was 16, it was 1990, she actually started work in sort of the sexual health area of the health department, and that sort of moved on to things like the HIV/AIDS unit, and she was doing a lot with education, but also, you know, very much at the cold face of dealing with people who eventually died from HIV/AIDS. So I think for me, I was actually just talking about it to Mum this morning and just sort of said, why is it that I have always just been such an ally and have simply never comprehended the points of difference that other people seem to have when it comes to the queer community? I've just simply never had it. And that is solely my family upbringing, without a doubt. And being raised in a family where, you know, choose kind, embrace points of difference in other people, you know, it's pretty base level. But for me particularly, so I've always had that love, and some of my most extraordinary people in my world are queer. You know, some of my very, very besties. So the Laramie Project particularly, I was in Hobart, I was living down there in 2008, I don't know if it was Facebook then, was that invented in 2008, but I think it was some sort of, I think it was around then that I remember sort of seeing it. I think it must have been through a social media platform then, about auditions coming up for the Laramie Project. For some reason it rang a bell, but I'm not sure why. Ended up doing a bit of research on it and sent off for the audition pack. It was actually produced by React Theatre in Hobart, Andrew Casey and the beautiful Andrea Moody, who's no longer with us. And they were really passionate about it, and they had engaged Robert Jarman, who's a very acclaimed director, to direct the show. And I was the very first person to audition. I remember going up to Hutchins School and being very prepared, knowing I needed to show I could sing, dance and act. Oh, no, that's the wrong genre, but no jazz hands with this, Gary. And went in and was really prepared and just had my eye on the prize. I thought I want to get in. And so I remember walking out of that audition thinking, well, I've laughed, I've cried, I've dropped to the ground, you know. I couldn't sort of do any more, and was thrilled to be cast in that show with some extraordinary actors. Not that I knew anyone at the time, but we were cast in there were eight in that cast, and we played up to 70 characters. So the challenge within the Laramie Project is the having to have incredibly talented actors that have the capacity to transition from one character to another, showing, you know, the story of the Laramie Project in a really interesting way for an audience. So that was sort of how I was first introduced to it.
Jaz, how many characters are you playing?
I think 5 or 6 in total. It's been easier in recent weeks, I think, when we're normal in the rehearsal room and kind of channeling other people. Trav has been great as well in helping us with how we can differentiate our voices. So, you know, kind of working with voice as well as then, I guess, like body language and how we stand and those kind of things. And then we're also going to be assisted by our costume designer, Janice, who is working to bring us our costumes to have different, I guess, elements of characters we can pull out. So in a pocket might be hiding something without giving too much away. You know, there'll be little other elements to help the audience understand who we are as well. Yeah. But I guess it's one of the beautiful things about it is that you do get to play with different types of people, and within the script, I mean, everyone was real. So Laramie's a verbatim theatre piece, which means that all of the lines are from real people, and they were captured at the time or just after Matthew Shepard died. And so these are all real people that exist in the world, and we get to, play and practice and act as those different people, which is, I think it's like quite exciting. You get to explore different parts of yourself, but also different parts of the community.
Do you have to play anyone that is against the values that you hold?
Not to the extreme of other people, no. Okay. I think a lot of there's some things where, definitely there's one part that is against my values, not in the terms of queer rights, but in another area. And then I imagine some of the other characters are homophobic, but they're not outwardly expressing it in the lines that I have. So I guess it's kind of like displaying that without actually saying, it's really confronting. I mean, it's a really, really impactful piece of theatre. So some of the lines in there are really heavy, but I don't have any of those.
That wasn't even deliberate, actually. It's interesting, isn't it, when you think we're casting you and working out who would be playing who. Yeah.
What was the casting process like?
Well, yes, it was. It's interesting with the Laramie Project because it's a show that can actually, I think traditionally, and when it was first done, which was sort of around back in 2000, they did have 8 actors. But it's something that is like, we've heard of like schools doing it. Like you can have very large casts because of the number of characters. So, but I knew for myself that I wanted to show off the skill set of some really incredibly talented actors, of which we have in abundance in Tassie. So I did a very traditional audition process. No one was pre-cast at all. There were a couple of people I'd sort of said, this might be something that could be of interest maybe to you, and let them know the audition dates. But it was very much, I think we had 31 auditions, which is quite high numbers for Launceston. Did it over a Friday night, a Saturday and a Sunday, and we were busy the whole time. It was sort of, like a 15, 20-minute sort of block for each person. But one of the things that I really wanted is I didn't really want people coming in particularly prepared. So I'd said to them, don't read the script. It was sort of different to probably how you normally would be. The audition pack was like, here are 6 monologues from the show. They weren't gender specific. There was nothing. So it was really interesting because just to have 6 monologues, a couple you sort of knew. I think one of them said, I knew it would be hard in Laramie to be a gay man. So clearly, it's probably a male role. But I sort of chose for 4 of the 6 that there was no reference to gender. And that was so interesting because people were coming in with no preconceived ideas of who was saying it. And that made it such an incredible experience, like hearing a couple of our amazing actors actually that are in the show, one in particular, coming in and actually saying some lines that were actually by Rebecca Hilliker, who's like the head of the theatre department at the University of Wyoming, where Matthew Shepard was studying, and hearing a male voice was just so interesting, and it still made perfect sense. So the actual casting was challenging though, because we had some extraordinary people, and I know that some people that didn't get into the show, not that they had any concerns, but I know that, just where you hear through the grapevine, people going, wow, if she didn't get in, how good's the cast, with certain people, just incredible calibre. But I also wanted it to be, because as Jaz said, with the play, the style, and for your listeners to know too, Gary, it is very much that I consider it like a live action documentary where the basic premise is that a group of New York Theatre Company actors went to the town of Laramie, which, just to give some perspectives, about the size of Devonport. And it was 4 weeks after what sort of came out to be a gay hate crime at a young 21-year-old university student named Matthew Shepard. And it was where it was quite a horrific crime that became sort of a national news story and then a global one. And so the Tectonic Theatre Project in New York went to Laramie 4 weeks after. There were I think predominantly all of those actors, I think bar one, were part of the queer community. So I think they were sort of saying, why has this happened? Let's go and not necessarily talk about Matthew Shepard specifically, but the impact of such a horrible crime in a town where this sort of thing was particularly unusual. So when they went to interview people, that's what the play then is. It's where, for example, an actor will be playing one of the Tectonic Theatre actors, interviewing a local person and then transitioning to be that local person. So for me, it wasn't about we need to see accent and I need to see physicality and characterisation in the audition. I needed people that could tell a story with truth. And so I said, no accents, come in and use your own voice and just tell me a story of your own. That was part of it, was a really important part. Tell me a story from your own life, something that's impacted your life, whether it be good, bad or indifferent. And the other part was the monologue. But to be honest, the key, and to be honest, Jaz is a great example. Jaz came in with really not a lot of experience at all as an actor, but her capacity to sit with a sense of truth and talk about something that had happened personally in her life, and also then the monologue was almost, just to see that I could, just to hear the words from someone else. But the key for Jaz's audition was her truth, and where you just couldn't help but not be listening and believing. And that's what I wanted for the cast of this. It's not, it's very much that ability. You just have to believe it. To be honest, often we're going, don't act, stop acting. Less is more here. Less is more. And we need to, because they're real people, most of whom are still alive. Most of whom you can Google and see an interview with, most of whom it's quite extraordinary. So, again, I've said to the cast, like, that's their jam if they want to do that, but I've been very much like, don't be thinking you are doing an impression of these people. You're not. It's us bringing our own sense of truth and just repeating what they said at a particularly sort of volatile time in their community. It was really interesting.
Travis, when I hear the words vocal coach, I immediately think of singing. Is there much singing involved in this play, or is it very much about giving different characters different voices, like Jaz kind of alluded to?
Yeah, well, so there is one sung element in the show, a piece that's performed at a really, really pivotal scene in the show, and I don't know if you want me to talk about exactly what that is, or
No, I think we'll keep that.
We'll keep that. Yeah, okay,
Especially
great.
because
No, that's all right. Yep.
that can be our little secret.
Yes, great, wonderful.
That's certainly not a secret that we're singing.
Yeah. Okay, good. I didn't want to totally do the spoilers there. So yeah. So there is a sung element, and you'll have to come along to see that. I won't say any more about that. But no, with the characters, I've certainly come on board to help out with the differentiation between the characters and their voices, because Rae and Jaz, they're quite right in everything they're saying with the verbatim theatre. It literally is words that come out of somebody's mouth. So usually when you have a script, a writer has agonised over every punctuation point, every capital letter, every pause, every ... every entrance. Everything has been so carefully considered. But in something like verbatim theatre, where you get the electricity, I think, is that it's not like that at all, and it's actually people's words. So anytime you're kind of struggling for delivery, you go, well, hang on, somebody has actually said this before. Whereas with other plays, it's not always the case. So that automatically grounds the piece in a reality that is now. And the reality of now, though, is that everybody has a completely different voice. Everybody talks in totally different ways. So it's about just kind of capturing those mannerisms, looking for ways that you can change. Is it a pitch thing? Are we going to speak a little higher? Are we going to go lower? Are we really going to talk very slowly while we consider what we say? And so there's some quick things that people can do, but the cast are so talented. They're so talented that they've already got a grasp on the accents, which is sometimes really tricky, particularly living in Launceston. We don't have a lot of exposure to other accents all the time. So that's really exciting, and people are making some bold choices with their character delivery and are now really starting to explore that and hone into where they've got to be for the performance element, because that's the thing that kind of changes this from just being, a bunch of interviews that people just kind of talk about on stage, is that it is theatrical and there's an element of performance to it. Like, these are real flesh and blood people up there that we're coming to see. But yeah, it's really, really exciting to see what everybody's bringing to it now, and some, very, very powerful work already. So, yeah.
Amazing. Had anyone, Rae, I know you said you were part of an earlier production, but Jaz and Travis, have you seen the show before? Have you seen the movie, the HBO film from 2002?
I was super lucky this year to actually see a rehearsed reading at the Sydney Recital Hall. And that was in collaboration with the Australian American Association, and the Matthew Shepard Foundation were involved as well. And they actually worked with Dennis Shepard, who's Matthew Shepard's father, to read his witness impact statement. So that Matthew's dad, Dennis, is in the play, and he reads his witness impact statement, which is very moving. And so Rae I'm signed up to lots of random queer email lists. So I'd actually gotten this in my inbox. And then Rae mentioned it, and when we were having our first kind of, bonding weekend away, kind of working with each other and building as an ensemble. And I happened to be going to Sydney. And so I was like, oh, I can actually go to this. And then so I got a bunch of friends together, which I like to do when I go to theatre. And sometimes they say, oh, don't tell me what it's about. Like, I just go in. I was like, I need to tell you what this is about, because when this man walks on stage, you have to know who he is, because it was incredible. The whole theatre was silent, and the acoustics in that place are amazing. So he walked out on stage. You could hear every single footstep, and then read the witness impact statement, and I don't think there was a dry eye in the house. So while I haven't seen it put on as like a production per se, even just the reading of it was incredibly powerful. And I think it would have been even if Dennis Shepard hadn't been reading his piece. And they did have a bit of an all-star cast as well. So that probably helped. But no, so that was amazing to see it kind of stripped back, but still carry such a powerful message.
Yeah, and my journey and experience with the Laramie Project as a play has been long and wild and wonderful and strange. So I was a teenager who had just come out, living in Launceston, when the crime actually happened. So the news stories that came down were so frightening. It was so terrifying, and I just didn't, to kind of grasp what this whole experience meant as a queer person from a small town, but also just in general as a queer person who's part of a global community, which is what, we all should hopefully be kind of thinking of ourselves as, and how that kind of affects. And I had that experience of knowing the story quite well, and then I went to university, and it was just after the play had been performed. So it was material that we engaged with while we were actually at university, the monologues and some sections from the play and some scripts. So sort of got to experience in that level. And then, saw a production in Perth that the Whopper Kids put on there. And then there've been 2 local productions that have been done by schools, Scotch Oakburn and Launceston College, which I work at. So it was really wonderful to see the young people, I say. To see a younger generation engaging with the text so passionately, because the generation now these days, well, my experience with working with them is that something like this is just so, they cannot understand how it could possibly happen. But also can understand how it could possibly happen, because these people, and these views still exist in society and around the place. But for them, it's just like, the sense I think that they come from it is a sense of complete and total injustice for him and the family and the queer community in general. And so they were very happy to get up there and play these confronting characters and share views that are difficult, I think, for depending on which side of the fence you're on. But if they were very aware of the fact that if you don't present this to an audience, then conversations can never happen. And people, it's theatre. This is where theatre's totally different to film and television, where film and television, you can turn it off. You can come back to it if it gets too confronting. You can you can give it a 1-star review and talk about how angry it made you because it was so upsetting or whatever. But with theatre, it's immediate, it's real, and it's flesh and blood, and it does spark something different. When you're in an audience and you see actors on stage that are emotionally engaged in something and they're feeling that, and maybe the tears come, or maybe there's some trembling in the voice, or maybe it's fear or anger or whatever it is, as human beings, naturally we key into each other's emotions. So when we see something on stage, it becomes more powerful. And if it even changes one person to kind of go, oh gosh, I did hear about that story and I didn't think anything of it. It didn't bother me at all. And then they might go, oh, but the family, the poor family of that man, and his friends, it might make them think about that. It might make them think about some language that they use in their own life and may want to reconsider. So that was a really long-winded story, I think, about my engagement with the show.
So interesting.
But so it's kind of, I come at it from a whole bunch of different angles, and then specifically to be working on the show as a voice director, for me, voice is where it all begins, with acting and with character and with truth, because you can have all types of different theatre, but you could have people sitting in the dark and talking, and you would get a play, you would get. You would understand what's going on, simply from the way that they use their voices. So for me, this is super also exciting to be a part of creatively. So yeah.
How connected is the cast and the production team to the queer communities? How personal is this story being told?
It's interesting actually, because having Patrick O'Halloran, our producer, is a queer man, and he's one of my very besties. And so for him, when I asked him, this is sort of his producing debut as well, again, it was a no-brainer for him to come on board, which was interesting. Patrick actually saw me, was one of the very few friends who came and saw the production I did in 2008. He was living and working in Hobart at the time, and he just remembers it so vividly. I played the part of Reggie Flutie, who our amazing Bindi Stevens in our cast is playing. And Reggie Flutie was the first responder, so she was the female police officer that was the first on scene to basically find Matthew Shepard. And the scenes There's a scene called Finding Matthew Shepard, and it's particularly powerful, as you can imagine. But it's so interesting. I know had Patrick not seen that in Hobart, there's no way he would have signed up to do it. He wouldn't have, because he's such a busy person. It just wouldn't have been something that he would have found time for. But for him, it was very much a case of absolutely we need to do this. And having his support, he's been my right-hand man, bit of a silent partner. So for him, it's like this is a story that has to be told now. It's 26 years later. It is still relevant. It fills me with joy to know that Travis's students at Launceston College and the younger generation this is huge injustice, but the reality is those kids' parents, grandparents, do you know what I mean? That's a change of generation. But yeah, Patrick was very much like this needs to happen. With the actual casting, it's interesting actually because we've predominantly got heterosexual actors. Again, allies, though, that were pretty quick to be signing up to audition and, fierce advocates. Having Jaz, of course, I didn't even know, anything about Jaz at all when you came in and auditioned. But Jaz has just brought another beautiful voice to the table as well. And we've learned a lot from her, having her involved. And Trav, I've known for many years and he's a dear friend. Having Travis involved as well, and particularly dealing with the Launceston College, your teenage, the people you're influencing, Trav. It's quite extraordinary. So we've linked in with Working It Out. Also, I've been very, very conscious. I spoke to the lovely Kelly Charles from Working It Out, and I didn't really understand that Working It Out predominantly assists the educators to, guide the younger people in the queer community. So I've learned a lot about the organisation and Headspace as well, because when I met with Kelly, she was very much like, you need to realise this could be really triggering. This is not a happy joy play for those in the queer community, which I had, of course, thought, but not to that extent. And that's been a really interesting approach to have Working It Out involved and Headspace, the lovely Kate Willis there. We're going to have an information booth in the foyer and where there's just that sort of letting people know we are doing a school performance on Tuesday, the 20th, and we've invited all of the schools around the north and northwest of the state, and they're year 10 to year 12 students. And predominantly, I'm sure most young people at that stage are knowing how they're feeling from a sexuality standpoint or their fluidity, wherever they're sitting. But there might be that one or two that aren't living a life of truth. And I just thought it could be really, really powerful for them to know when they leave, they could just grab a brochure or know that there's someone there that they could have a quick chat to, or even just to have a business card of the people at Headspace, anything like that, where they can just do that in a way that there is that support and that it is there. You just don't always know where to find it. So that's been probably a big thing for me, Gary, that I was educated more through talking to other people as to how, and the Pride UTAS crew as well, like trying to link in with people that will support it, will spread the word. And so for me, it wasn't where I intentionally thought I need to cast queer actors, but I certainly need to be casting queer allies. And some of the content is hard-hitting. And I know that even for our casts that aren't within the community but sort of on the periphery in support, find it just so powerful and really emotional. Yeah. And are also like, we just can't even believe it, that these things happen. So it's been, I think, and I also feel too, Trav, what you've said, for me, I know I have a lot of people in my world that wouldn't consider themselves homophobic, but still I have to call them out,
Yeah.
And I'm really emphasising to these people, particularly to come and see it, in support of me, of course, but also because I want it to be an educational experience. Because so often we don't even realise that comments we make are bigoted or ignorant. It's only when someone says, that's not okay to say that. And we've all been there, haven't we? I've had it happen where you go, and then you feel, God, I'm so sorry. I just didn't think that through. Or I just know that a lot of these people that I'm talking about, I deeply love and care for, and they would never think that they sat in a place of bigotry. And I just know they're going to come and go, oh my gosh, exactly like you said, Trav. They're going to go, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought of it. That's really got me in the feels, Yeah. And just to have an element of awareness, just to lose that bit of ignorance, that's what it is for me, just to be less ignorant just don't
Yeah.
have an opinion on something so strongly you simply don't comprehend.
That's right. Like if we don't. I mean, well, yes, we kind of are trying to change the world, but
We
like,
are.
we are changing the world, but it also doesn't have to be that. Like if for whatever reason, there's people out there that can't reconcile that view and they just still find it something they do not understand, don't get it, don't like it. Okay, but you don't have to discriminate. That can be your opinion, and you can still conduct your life. Like you don't have to outwardly look for ways to put people down and discriminate and get outraged. Every time there's a rainbow flag that appears on something, like you don't like it. It's not affecting you. It doesn't. You don't have to actually react in that way. And I agree though too, Rae. Like there's definitely still people around me in my life who I love and care about a lot, but it's occasionally the comments slip out and you sort of go, well, I'm surrounded by people that I can actually have those conversations with and say, hey, like that comment that you made, it's not ideal. Like, well, what's that about? Like, let's have a chat.
Yes,
yes. And that's fine. But then there are other people that would literally need to see something like this and to feel it to be able to go, oh, there's another way to look at this. Yeah, there's another way to look at this. And that's what we want to do.
Absolutely.
They're the doors that you kind of want to open because it is still really, really hugely, sadly, relevant. There's still a lot of discrimination and a lot a and you hear all the horrendous.
Even in Canberra recently, there's been targeted attacks.
That is just appalling.
Yeah.
That whole situation. Because so there's still a section of society that not only think it's okay to discriminate, but that it's okay to harm, to actively go out and seek people to hurt. Like that's not cool. Like we need to be definitely combating that for sure.
One of the things, the Matthew Shepard Foundation was established by Matthew's parents, Dennis and Judy Shepard, and I just think they are the most extraordinary people because you think their son was brutally beaten. Just to give your listeners a bit of background, this isn't a spoiler either because it's very much was what was in the news at the time. So back in 1998. Where their son was brutally beaten after being sort of kidnapped, or he sort of went seemingly willingly with a couple of local men. This is why it had such an impact because they were pretty much his similar age, 21, local men that a lot of people knew in the community. So it was, again, that ripple effect. It wasn't like it's someone who's come into town and done it. It's people that had grown up there, were real Laramie local people. And he was left tied to a fence, they'd taken him some distance out onto a fairly isolated space and left him tied for 18 hours, and then he was discovered by a cyclist. And so that was on the 12th of October that he actually passed away, 1998. And then on the 1st of December 1998, so you think literally within that 3-4 month period, his parents set up this foundation, which would have been Matthew Shepard's 22nd birthday, actually, the 1st of December. And I just know, being a parent, I've got 2 gorgeous kids, that the thought of setting up a foundation within 3 months of my son being brutally murdered, I don't even know if I'd be out of bed yet. Do you know what I mean? But they were so motivated by the amount of money they were actually being sent by people in cards and letters. They just received so many incredibly supportive, beautiful, loving messages that had cash in the cards and cash in the letters, and they were like, we have to do something with this money. So I think in a way they have continued Matthew's legacy. It's actually given them a reason to go on, to keep going, because they started that and the foundation is just leaps and bounds. I mean, their goal was the foundation would close its doors. They don't want it to be that they're needing to be there for people in the queer community that need support. But they've done the most extraordinary work, and these purple little bracelets that we're wearing actually say erase hate, and their motto is erase hate since 1998. And I think that for me is where so much of it comes back to. Yeah. I often say to my children, like, the H word, it's not a word I like to use in our home, because I'll say, if you're saying that about someone, in my opinion, that means that if you heard they'd passed away, you wouldn't even care. That to me is the definition of hate. Yeah. If you're saying that and then you heard that person had died, that you'd go, oh, well, So I said that to me is the level of hate. So we don't say it in our household. It's quite funny. It's almost up there with the F word, which is fine with me, you know, because I'll say you can dislike someone immensely, intensely. I really, really, really don't like them, Mum, you know. But the hate thing, it's just something I've never understood. I've probably never hated anyone, to be honest, to that extent. And I just think that a race hate since 1998 is just so incredibly powerful, because that's what we're wanting to do with the Laramie Project. Yeah. We're wanting it to be that people maybe shift from a place of feeling hateful about it to at least go, why do I feel that way? Why on earth do I feel so hateful about people that I would never have to have anything to do with if I chose not to? It's just that for me. Yeah, I just think, and the work they're doing, and, you know, Dennis and Judy is still at the helm of the foundation. Yeah, it's amazing. And that was sort of, they've been incredibly supportive. They were the ones that sent me the armbands. I got in touch with the foundation early on once I was told I was directing, and they were like, what do you need? They've sent us archival news footage. They've just, anything we have needed, they've sent. Katie Hanna is the beautiful lady that's in charge there with all this side of it. She was the one that offered us an opportunity to actually have a Zoom call with Dennis Shepard. I mean, this is like research that you just couldn't even
you'd never get
imagine.
it. You'd never, ever. No way.
To have it offered, to actually have Katie say, look, Dennis does often do Zoom calls with casts and different groups around the world. And then it was so extraordinary that he happened to be in Australia. Like, for him to do that reading of a section of his own impact statement, he's only ever done it once before. So you think to be doing that in Sydney and for Jaz to witness that, I feel it's really weird, actually, the timing of it all, because I just feel like, why this year did I choose to do the Laramie Project and Dennis Shepard's here? And, you know, it's just all these things. It's been really odd. And another thing with, you know, where you look at serendipity and those sorts of things, you go, why is this happening? Is my sister spent a lot of time, or lived in Colorado in the US for 10 years, and one of her very best friends was having a milestone birthday, and thought that a nice present to herself would be paying for our entire family to go and be there, which I thought was a really lovely gift for herself. So she paid for my parents. She's very close to our family, my sister, my brother, my parents, me and my kids. And so we were flown over for this incredible birthday celebration, and it was where I was like, oh my gosh, Colorado, like the next state over is Wyoming. It's like a 2-hour drive from Denver, Colorado to Laramie, Wyoming. And I thought, this is weird, you know, because even if our friend's birthday, even if she'd been in San Francisco, I would not have gone to Laramie. No. I just wouldn't have. So it was the proximity, you know. And so I said to my dad, let's go and do a road trip to Laramie. And he was like, absolutely. And obviously my parents had been to see the show that I did in 2008 and incredibly supportive of everything I do. And my dad, being an educator, he's been a teacher his whole career, still is, that when I said to him, I really want to go to the University of Wyoming where Matthew was studying at the time, and we know from direct contact with his best friend, he was so happy. He'd linked in with the gay and lesbian communities groups, and he was like part of Pride Week, and
you were there during Pride Month as well.
I was just there was all the posters and everything up. Yeah, so it was so incredible. Yeah, getting there and seeing all these like candlelit vigils for Matthew Shepard, seeing all these posters, and I'm like, why? It's not his birthday, not December, not the anniversary of his death. Of course, coming up to Pride Month. And there's also a beautiful memorial bench seat outside the Arts and Sciences building where he was studying. There's this beautiful memorial bench seat for Matthew Wayne Shepard. And I've never done anything. It felt like a real pilgrimage. It was a really extraordinary experience. And I've never ever sort of gone to any sort of memorial site for an individual. You know, it was sort of very similar, I think, about when a girlfriend died and you go to the graveside for the first time. And but not for a person. It just felt so personal. It was really moving and emotional. And just being there and going, this is where he was. And the University of Wyoming campus is just stunning. It is one of the most exquisite uni campuses. It's deliberately, they like to keep it as inexpensive as possible, and it's a campus where you can study everything from like paleontology to accounting to theatre to, political science, which Matthew was studying. So it's this vast campus that really is the reason that that Laramie's even known because it's nice and central. But that was just amazing. And we got a tour around the campus and they said, "Oh, you're the film director from Australia?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "No, just directing a community theatre show in Launceston, but sort of the same." But they were just so helpful and lovely. And I just thought, wow, Matthew Shepard's legacy. And he always said to his parents he loved acting and theatre, and he always said he wanted to be famous. And I just think, how extraordinary that he's known the world over, sort of for a very tragic reason, but yeah, the irony's not lost with his parents either. That he is famous. Yeah.
It's funny that Rae mentions all this serendipitous kind of things that were happening. For me as well, it feels quite, I guess, serendipitous that I'm here and a part of it, really.
Yes.
So when I auditioned, so my background is that I'm a medical doctor, and I've mostly been working in that for the last studying and working with that for the past 10 to 12 years. And I did a short course with NIDA and the National Institute of Dramatic Arts at the beginning of this year, and I'd learned a lot. And part of the reason I was doing that was to see if I wanted to kind of make a career shift and study theatre and performance or not. And those 3 weeks kind of assured me that's what I wanted to do. And I did this audition almost just as a practice. And my friends who I was with in NIDA were like, "Well, careful! It's always the ones that you don't think you care about that you're going to end up getting."
I don't think I've ever known this story.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. It's true though.
I was like, because I was only going to be in Tasmania for 3 months, so I'd come down for a 3-month contract, and that was in February, and we're now in August, so yeah. And so I went in, I prepared, but I prepared well, and I put everything that I'd learned into practice. But I was like, doesn't matter how it goes because it's also was like community theatre in Launceston. I don't know what it's like. I didn't realise how amazing the community theatre scene in Launceston is. Like the theatre here is phenomenal, both musical theatre and straight theatre. I learned it to be called. I didn't know it was called straight theatre.
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah. No pun intended.
No pun intended.
It's contradictory.
That's right. I know.
Exactly.
So silly. And so I'd seen a Three River production last year, and what drew me to this was that was things I know to be true, and that had a trans character in it, and I was like, oh, amazing! There's representation on stage. This is what I want. Like I want to be a part of a theatre company that is, I don't know, acknowledges my community, who I am, other parts of society. And so when I found that there was a Laramie Project that was done, I was like, great, like I can be a part of queer theatre. And I think representation on stage is really important. I grew up in a small country town in New South Wales, so not Tasmania, but similar vibes. Like I don't think I even knew any like lesbian women or queer women, I don't know, until my late teens, maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't certainly I heard about gay men. I don't think we knew any either. So yeah, that kind of it didn't even cross my mind that that's what people could be or might be. So I think having representation on stage is really important. But yeah, so I came to the audition and gave it a red hot crack, having used all my new knowledge. And then Rae called me and I found out that I got in. So I was like, oh, I guess maybe I need to extend my work contract. How do I was like, I look like I'll be staying in Tasmania.
I'm so pleased you did, Jaz.
Yeah, which is great. And I'd also applied to a theatre school, which the following day I found out I'd gotten into that as well. So I thought, oh, excellent, I'll actually have some experience before I then go on to study this a bit more.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
so it's
it.
very
That's
cool.
in France,
So,
by the way,
that's in
the
France.
theatre school
Yeah,
she's
the
going
theatre
to.
school's in France, which is a whole other story.
Wow.
Yeah. So it is all very,
incredible.
it's very, I'm very excited. So I leave 30th of September. So everything's worked out like
amazing,
incredibly
isn't it?
well. Yeah. And I think, Trav, you were saying just recently that you wanted to support more theatre and work on queer theatre.
Yeah.
I was like, I kind of would be great if that's all I could do. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
or like
absolutely.
if a character had been like not play a straight character unless we needed diversity in the cast and there were too many queer characters and someone needed to be straight. Like I was like, okay, I'll do that.
Okay,
Like, sure.
yeah.
But
token
otherwise,
straight.
yeah, token
token
straight. Where's our straight
Straight.
person?
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, so I think I was like, oh, it would just be so amazing for the rest of like my acting career that I can do that. I'm like, oh, and so it's really nice to start with Laramie, and you know, I play a queer woman as one of my characters, which is it's really nice. And my audition was like I'd auditioned with one of the lesbian characters, which was, it was just really nice. It's just like, oh, this is so cool, and so cool that it's happening in Launceston.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's great.
Unfortunately, I think it's still very relevant a story for Tasmania, especially in the
Gary.
north and northwest.
Yes.
Has there been any negative reaction to the Laramie Project being advertised or talked about?
Not directly to me, but you know, something that I've had to go, wow, I think this is a factor, is we have applied for, I reckon about, if Patrick was here, he'd be able to tell me, maybe 10 grants, and we haven't got one. We haven't got one from across the board, from, local. It's just made me go, not one. Seems weird.
It's interesting.
And we're not talking huge amounts of money. You know, someone was up to like 3, you know, like
But
a
just
good chunk.
But a $250, you know, like
Those ones, to be honest, we've just been inundated with support from local business and people we know, and that's been extraordinary. Had it not been, actually, I'm going to do a bit of a shout out, but property-wise, Launceston, for example, here in Launceston, Sally Shaw, the director of that company, she and I were just having a professional chat. She was like, sort of saying, what's this thing you're doing, you know? And I told her how we hadn't got a grant that was for a significant amount. And she's like, how much money do you need? What? And she's like bringing her 10 staff to see it. She doesn't want comp tickets. She's like, no, we'll pay. She's like, because of her and her company actually investing, it's where we've now gone, we can have what we wanted for the set. We can have that extraordinary costume, you know, that clever thing that we thought, wouldn't it be great? And it's been more that, people going, oh my God, tell me more. This is so interesting, or I haven't ever thought about that. Or, you know, people that aren't, they're not actually, they don't even have a specific opinion about it. They're almost indifferent. And then they'll go, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. But I have been really surprised by the grant applications, that it's just been a thanks but no thanks for every single one. That's just, again, it could be that there's been an inundation of applicants, and I'm sure that's also part of it. But I have found it a little bit strange.
I think it speaks to that, even though community might be really open and accepting, there's still this systemic change that needs to happen.
Absolutely.
That is so slow down here.
Absolutely right. Yeah, it's been the private people that have helped, but I've not had any negativity directed to me. I mean, would they dare?
Would they actually dare?
I don't know.
I don't know public. I don't know.
I
I've
don't
not
know
had
if people,
anything.
unless they know it either, that it's not overtly queer. Like it just, like the
True.
Laramie Project, you see it, you don't think, oh, like it's not a drag queen, you know, it's not 2 women or 2 men kissing on the front page. Like it's, I don't know if even, I went to there's like a monthly queer drinks that happen at the Royal Oak. So I just popped in very briefly last night and said a quick hello, and I was chatting to someone. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be in the Laramie Project. And she's like, oh, you've seen that. Oh, Laramie. Oh, it's that Laramie Project. I'm like, yeah, what other Laramie Project would it be?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you
That's
don't know, it, you might not know that it is a queer piece of theatre.
Yes, that's
It's
very
kind of-
valid, actually.
Yeah. And even on the, like even just the posters that are around, you know, it's a tragedy, it's all these things. So if you went in, if you were kind of, that looks cool, I'll come kind of person, you wouldn't know.
No, that's true.
Which I think is interesting as well, because that's kind of how a lot of queer people are. Like you don't wear your queerness, or sometimes you do because like you look a certain way. But for example, like you don't know someone's sexuality when you see them.
yeah, exactly.
So I guess in a way that's kind of interesting as well, because you know people might come to it and not know what they're getting. And
Yes.
And that'll help.
Yeah.
I think that'll help get the message across to the people that you want it to get across to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because the people that know the story are going in already understanding the dynamic of the story.
Yes.
But if you're going in blind and maybe you don't know what it is, maybe you're one of those people that needs to hear that message. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
fantastic.
One of the things that was very interesting when we spoke to Dennis Shepard, and it's so true, is he said, you replace sexuality in this play with race, religion. It's about ignorance and bigotry. And I think too, it's interesting that we got this lovely letter actually sent. I should have brought it in from Judy Shepard, just sort of congratulating us on what we're doing. And she said, and because sometimes people refer to Laramie as that gay play, when it's actually the opposite of that. And I know even with a couple of people in my world, I know that they've sort of gone, so what's it about? And I can just see they're a bit like, oh, Rae, if it wasn't you directing, there's no way they'd come. They really wouldn't.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't.
Yeah.
I know they wouldn't. And I think they're almost a bit like, what's it going to be? And then they're going to come and see that it's actually about the impact of a tragedy on a town. But it could be that, Matthew Shepard could have been Muslim, or do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily about sexuality. It's actually not. It's about bigotry and hate, and why don't we just accept people that are different to us, So I think no matter what, it's, like you're saying, Jaz, it's not where there's ever any too many kisses. It's not even about the gay issue, really, is it? I mean, it's more about violence against people that appear to be different. So I just think it's where it'll be really interesting to see the response that people have, and they will have a response, whether it be, I don't know if that was my cup of tea, or, wow, I feel changed after that, And I know that a lot of people that came and saw that production in 2008 still, like my parents go, oh, that one scene when you did that, we'll never forget it. And even my auntie and uncle were coming up from Hobart to see this, and they're like, oh, we just remember that so vividly. It's really one that makes an impact, and it certainly did for me, right under my skin from then,
And I think it definitely does, and it's another wonderful thing about actually doing the show is that certainly for people that don't want to engage, they can keep it at arm's length, and they can even watch it and disassociate like that if they need to. But for the queer community that come to see the show and their allies and their family and their friends, it is hugely important, and it's hugely significant because of what the story represents, and the fact that it's being done in Launceston it's just massive, and it's so important for that community. I know that every member of the queer community that goes to see that show will have some kind of very, very, very powerful response to it, and it might be triggering for some people, but it's also hugely cathartic, and it could be a place of healing as well to see the story from its beginning to its end, and kind of process things in that way. So on the flip side of it being it's kind of great, but maybe for these people that might have some of those attitudes that they don't know what they're coming along to see, but for the people who do, my gosh, it is so important. It's so valuable. And I think like Jaz mentioned before, I had in my own career recently, after a speech I did at your event actually, which I was reminded of the other day, where I made a commitment to do more queer theatre, and then what is queer theatre? And, the argument that all theatre's kind of queer theatre because there's been at least one gay person working on every play that's ever been done, surely. But no, stereotypes aside. Stereotypes aside.
Making your point.
Yeah, exactly. It's about theatre that's about queer people.
Yes.
So it's about queer and those stories. It's not a bunch of queer people working on a play that's about some really pretty heterosexual people. Which
Plenty of those already.
Yeah, don't worry, we love those too. That's okay, that's fine. But to actually then have a piece of work, theatre to work on then as an artist who is queer, that's also hugely valuable too. Even though I'm only in a couple of rehearsals and I'll be there for the season and everything, but it's really for my heart and my soul as that gay kid that was reading those articles in 1998, this is big for him. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think because a lot of like there are a higher proportion of queer people that we interviewed as well.
Yes.
And so it's not just that it's queer theatre, but it's real queer representation on stage as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you get to see a
Yeah.
plethora of people. There's older like men, there's younger women, and I think that part is really meaningful. Even just, I don't know, there's one of the lines that one of the younger lesbians says, and she just like is powerful and passionate and confident. And that's the kind of thing a young queer person needs to see on
I
stage.
agree.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that I am comfortable in me, you're okay. Like, yeah, I think that those kind of messages will be really well received among like the broader message of eradicating hate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
definitely.
Sure. What's been your favourite part of the rehearsal process?
I almost started crying when we were with Trav doing our secret thing that we're not allowed to talk about.
It's a singing bit. The power of voice. Yeah.
It was so moving. I was, it's really powerful. I don't know if that's been my favourite part or not, but I was like, whoa, I'm going to need to get used to this because otherwise I'll be crying on stage. Yeah, I think Rae's been an amazing director. So this is kind of technically, I guess, my acting debut since I've done very minor things in university. And it's Rae's directing debut. So it's fun that we're working on this together.
Absolutely.
And the whole process has just felt so like nourishing, and I'm just going to, like, Rae's just been so amazing and supportive, and everyone that we've been working with has been amazing as well. There are really, 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 really talented people in the play. So I think for me, apart from this one moment of Trav's vocal coaching and singing coaching that led to tears, I think just generally working with such a talented bunch of people who are doing something they love. And again, because it's so important for me to be working in a queer space, like having that kind of underlie it all as well has been huge. Yeah.
So you had the Zoom call with Matthew Shepard's father, Dennis.
That's right, yes.
And who was involved in that call? Was that everyone?
It was one of those things where, because with the time difference, so Dennis and Judy Shepard still live in Wyoming. They live in Casper, which is about 4 hours from Laramie, and have continued. That's where Matthew sort of grew up, so they've stayed there, which also I find quite interesting that, you know, they've based themselves there still. And with the time difference, trying to work out when we could link in. And also Dennis had been in Australia, so bizarrely, merely like I think 2 weeks prior to us having this opportunity, but we'd sort of hoped we could link it in maybe when he was in Australia, but then they were too busy and it was all a bit tricky. But we worked out that we could do it on a Sunday morning our time at 9:30, which was equivalent to 5:30 p.m. for him on the Saturday evening. And so it was late. We found that out on the Friday. So it was sort of like, here's the Zoom link, guys, whoever can come in. And there were 9 of us that were able to join in. And he was Jaz had given us some insight, because when she went to see the rehearsed reading, there was like a Q&A after the actual performance.
To give you a heads up, he's very funny.
He's hilarious.
He's a very funny man. Like, I was really surprised at how funny and charismatic he was in this Q&A. And very open as well. Like, he told us that because it's only the second time he's ever read the speech, that he was, shaking, but also had flashbacks to what it was like to be in that courtroom. And he was kind of transported, 21 years ago, or was it 25 years ago? 25 years ago, back to when this all happened. But
you've given some insight into his character. Like Jaz said, he's really great. Like, I think he'll be really good to talk to. It's not like he sort of was needing a bit of a push to express himself. And he's a bit of a chatterbox, actually. And it was just wonderful. And the very first thing, I almost felt like I was connecting with, like, Brad Pitt, or probably would have put on a bit more lippy for Brad, but I was like, oh my gosh, like, I actually felt quite nervous, and I knew because I was the linking person, and he was there. Like, I've got onto Zoom, and Dennis is already there, and he's in his office in his home, and it was just so extraordinary, because we had, I think particularly Stuart Loon, who's one of our incredibly talented cast, he is actually playing, this isn't a spoiler, but he's actually playing the part of Dennis Shepard. So Dennis is only in the show once, and that is where, as Jaz said, it's an excerpt from his I think it's the victim or witness impact
Oh,
statement.
maybe victim impact.
Yeah, victim impact
that's it,
statement.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it was.
yeah.
And so it's like this an amazing where they've sort of taken what was a 4-page statement, 4 A4 pages, and condensed it into this really powerful speech. And it was wonderful because we all had the opportunity. I'd sort of said to the cast, we'll introduce ourselves and then all have a question, so we can go. And I didn't know how much time we had. And Katie had said, look, sort of between 30 minutes to an hour. I don't think Dennis has got anything on that night. So she's like, he's sort of allocated some time. And it was amazing for Stuart because Stu could actually talk directly to the person that he is playing, and got such insight. Again, this stuff that could not be Googled, and he was just so hilarious. At one stage, I got a screenshot of both he and Peter McCallum, again, one of our extraordinary cast, and they're both laughing and they've got their heads back with their mouths open and it's like they look identical. Like I think it was in response to something funny I'd said, I'm sure, Gary. And they, it was actually because I think I said how Pete was crazy or Pete's playing a part called Doc O'Connor. And it was wonderful because we'd say, Peter would go, hi, Dennis, I'm Peter McCallum. I'm playing the part of the narrator in Doc O'Connor. And Dennis said, oh, yeah, crazy old Doc, right? And so we laughed, and that was when I got this screenshot. But just to have Dennis to say, oh, let me tell you about Doc O'Connor, or, for example, Reggie Flutie, and who was the first responder, has just become like a daughter to he and Judy. He was just telling us these things. He said, she's so hilarious, she's so funny, So to be able to give this insight, to the young guy that found Matthew Shepard, a guy called Aaron Kreifels, again, it was where Dennis was saying he's like a man in his 40s, has never recovered from that. Yeah. Never, ever. He was 19, he went out on a bike ride and discovers this boy, this body, Never, ever, ever has he recovered, where he said he's maybe 85%, just ruined his life. He was never able to move on, And so you can imagine for the actor playing that part, we've now got this insight we can work with. And for me as a director to go, okay, this is where we know for a fact this was a major case of post-traumatic stress. This young man's never recovered, okay? So we can actually bring to that character from him finding Matthew, insight and emotion and a level of truth for my actor that we just wouldn't have had, And so one other thing I loved with Dennis is he said at the very beginning, no question is off limits. He said, nothing you ask me. He's like, it's seriously all out there. And there were such extraordinary things that the cast asked. Like Peter said, what about your other son, Logan, who was 4 years younger than Matthew, who they just totally shielded? You don't even hear of him. And so that was incredibly interesting as well, and Logan's gone on to work for the Matthew Shepard Foundation and done other things. But, that was where, we gained insight that when Logan went to the university, they changed his surname on the student roll so he could go there and study without being known as a Shepherd. Where the university faculty did that for him, shielded him, just all these things. We would never know that had we, and it's not even where we can't talk about it publicly. Dennis was very much like, whatever he was telling us, it's not where it's an issue talking to you about it. It was very much like, this is incredible insight. And he actually, one of the questions that Angie asked, Angie Collins, again, the cast are all amazing. I'll let you know who they are actually. So we've got Stuart Loon, Peter McCallum, Bindi Stevens. Did I just say Angie? Yeah. Jaz Daniells, of course. We've got Kelly Howe, Liz Penfold, Declan Hayes, and Jessie Apted. Did I get them all? Yeah. They're all just so extraordinary and names people will know locally from their incredible achievements. But it's one of those things where for the cast to be able to ask these questions, get those insights, and everyone was asking such interesting questions. And as I was saying, Angie said to Dennis, is there anything in the play that they didn't include that you wish they had, And he said, absolutely not.
If you could let me know when the show opens, how long are you on for, and where people can get tickets?
Sure. So we actually open, we've got our opening night on Wednesday, the 21st of August We are doing 5 public shows, so the Wednesday through to the Saturday evening, 7 o'clock start, 7 p.m. We've also got a very traditional early matinee time on Saturday, the 24th of August, 11 a.m. So we've got the evening shows and the one matinee. It's being performed at the Earl Arts Centre, which is the theatre space behind the Princess Theatre, and people can get tickets via the Theatre North website, which is just theatrenorth.com.au, or they can call the Princess Theatre box office directly. So, yes, we'd love you to come along. There may still be door sales available as well, but I suggest that you get tickets because Tasmanian audiences do tend to leave it till the last minute. So you then hear people say, I missed out, I should have come. So we'd love people to come and see the Laramie Project from the 21st till the 24th of August.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for coming in and having a chat today. It's been really great to sit here and talk about some really, I think, important issues and what sounds like is going to be an amazing show. So thank you all.
Thank you, Gary.
Thanks.
It's
See
been
you
a
there.
pleasure. Thank you.